Hello and welcome back to JQuery for designers. In this lesson we're going to talk about functions in JavaScript. If you already know what a function is and how functions are used, then you don't need to watch this particular video. But for those of you who have not had any experience with JavaScript, who have no idea what a function is in programming, then it might behoove you to watch this video. So we're going to start by creating a simple HTML5 document using the HTML5.type. And we'll put our opening and closing HTML tags here. We're not going to have much in the way of a design. In fact, we're not going to put anything really inside the body of our document. But I want to create some JavaScript here that's going to give us an alert pop-up. So we're going to put a script tag inside the head of our document. And with HTML5, the default script is JavaScript, so we don't have to put type equals JavaScript. Instead, we could just put an opening and closing script tag here, and then inside those script tags we can put our JavaScript code. Well, if we wanted some kind of alert box to pop up whenever we opened our page, we could do that using the window.alert function. So we would type window.alert, and then inside parentheses and inside quotation marks, we would type in the text that would show up in that pop-up. So I'm just going to type, here is some text. And then at the end of the statement, we're going to put a semicolon. All statements in JavaScript end in a semicolon. So let's take a look at that. Let's save our file. I'm going to save it in our project files folder as functions.html. So I'm just including the JavaScript inside our HTML file. Later on, we're going to be putting our JavaScript in a separate file, but for now, we'll just include it in the script tag in the head of our document. So let's see if this works. I'm going to jump over to Chrome. I'm going to hit Command O or Control O on a PC to open up a file. And in our project files folder, I'm going to open up this functions.html file that we just saved. So we're going to click on Open. And as soon as that file opens, we see our JavaScript pop-up. It says, here's some text. And we can click on OK to dismiss that dialog. Well, that's the default behavior of a JavaScript statement. If we just put a JavaScript statement here, it's automatically going to run. However, let's take a look at what happens if we put it inside a function. So the way a function works, let's skip a couple lines here, is we type in the word function, space, and then the name of the function. So let's just call this new alert. And then we're going to have a set of opening and closing parentheses. Sometimes for some functions you will have something that goes inside those parentheses, but regardless of whether you have something inside the parentheses, you still need the parentheses there. And then we're going to put all of our content for the function inside curly brackets. So we'll put our opening curly bracket here, and then we'll skip a couple lines and we'll put our closing curly bracket down here. So let's take this window.alert statement, cut it, and then paste it inside this function. And let's see what happens. Let's save our file, jump back into Chrome and refresh our page, and we see that nothing happens. And the reason nothing happens is because we put that code inside a function. So a function is a block of code. It doesn't just have to be one line of code. We can put as much code inside this function as we want. But that block of code will not run unless we call on that function and tell it to do something. And the way we call on a function that we've created is we simply type in the name of the function. So we can type in new alert, and then we put our opening and closing parentheses again, and then a semicolon to end that statement. And what this line here is doing is it's calling on this function that we created up here. So if we save our file now and then refresh our page, now our pop-up is showing up again, because even though it's hidden inside of a function, we're calling the function down here, and when we call that function, all of the code inside the function will run. Now there are other instances, and we'll discover this as we start working in jQuery, where you don't need to give your function a name like we did here. And again, we'll talk about that later on, but I just wanted you to know how a function works, and it's important to understand the structure of a function in order to be able to understand what we're going to be doing later on in jQuery, because we're going to be creating some functions as we work through our code. So one more thing I want to talk about with our functions are these parentheses right here. These parentheses allow us to send information to that function. So let's say that we wanted to add two numbers together. So we have a function that's going to do that for us. Well, in order to make this happen, we want this function to accept two different values. So we're going to create those two different values here inside the parentheses. So we're going to say num1, comma, num2. These are basically names that we've given for the values that are going to be passed into the function. Then for our window.alert, instead of putting some text inside quotes here, we're just going to type in num1 plus num2, and it will add those two numbers together. So now when we call our function down here, we need to include two numbers inside the parentheses here in order for that function to work properly. So inside this new alert function call, inside those parentheses, I'm just going to type 2, comma, and then 3. So hopefully it will add those two numbers together when we call on this new alert function, and the pop-up should just give us the number 5. So let's see if that works. We'll save our file, go back to our page and refresh it, and there we go. Our pop-up simply has the number 5 in it. It added those two numbers together successfully. So that's how the parentheses work. If you need to send information into a function, you can do that by including these variable names inside parentheses. And if you're not familiar with variables, a variable is just simply a named storage unit. So we're creating a storage unit called num1, and we're sending a value into that storage unit here. So when we send these two values into these two variables, when we go into our function, we're adding those two variables together, or adding the values within those variables together to give us that new pop-up that we saw. So we can change these numbers here. We can change this to 4 and this one to 10, and then rerun our code. Let's just save our file and refresh our browser, and now it's giving us 14 instead of 5. So no matter what two numbers we put in here, it's going to add those two numbers together. So those are the basics of how functions work in JavaScript. And again, we'll talk later on about how we can make use of these functions in jQuery. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.